He dragged her by her hair in front of his friends. But years later, she returned not as his wife, but as his landlord. You won't believe how a silent, broken girl turned her pain into power and made the man who mocked her pay for every tear. Kena was only 19, quiet and unnoticed in the village of Mbenzi. After losing her parents in a tragic boat accident, she was taken in by her aunt. Life was survival, cooking, scrubbing, carrying water, and enduring harsh words. She never complained, she just worked. Her voice was soft, her presence almost invisible. People looked past her, even when she served them food or helped them in silence. Then came Dalizu. He arrived with loud music blaring from his dented red pickup truck, chains around his neck, sunglasses on his head, and a cocky smile on his face. He was a mechanic from the nearby town of Zubani and loved being the center of attention. Girls giggled when he passed. Mothers warned their daughters to stay away. But Dalizu wasn't looking for someone flashy. He wanted someone silent, easy to control. That's why he picked Kena. He saw her sweeping the compound one morning and smirked. "That one," he told her aunt. "I want her as my wife." Her aunt didn't protest. A poor girl like Kena couldn't expect much. Dalizu paid a small bride price, threw a noisy, rushed wedding, and took her to Zubani. But marriage wasn't love. It was command and control. Dalizu never looked at Kena as a partner, only a servant. She wasn't allowed to decorate the house, touch his things, or even speak too much. "Know your place," he always barked. She cooked, cleaned, and stayed out of his way. Then came the day he humiliated her. He invited his friends over, Mwalo, Brikoto, and Zajo. They drank cheap liquor in the living room, shouting and laughing. Kena was cooking, but the gas finished. The food was late. Dalizu snapped. Without warning, he marched into the kitchen, grabbed her by the hair, and dragged her out into the yard. His friends burst into laughter. "Show her who's boss!" one shouted. Kena didn't scream. Her scalp burned. Her knees scraped the cement, but she stayed silent. That moment changed everything. He threw her into the boys' quarters, an old cramped outhouse behind the main building, and told her that's where she belonged. She slept on a thin mat, ate cold leftovers, and cried only when no one could hear. Dalizu brought women into the main house. They wore perfume and heels, while Kena scrubbed their footprints the next day. But quietly, Kena began to build something. She borrowed a little money from a woman at the market and started frying yam and selling it at the bus stop. At first, people mocked her. Even Dalizu laughed when he saw her standing under the sun. But Kena wasn't just selling food. She was planting her future, one hot, spicy piece at a time. No one knew that the silent girl they once ignored was already planning to rise. And when she did, she would rise higher than any of them could ever imagine. Dalizu was tall, loud, and full of himself. His gold chain swung with every step, and his red pickup made noise even when parked. He always had toothpicks in his mouth and sunglasses on, even when the sky was grey. Girls in Mbenzi whispered and laughed when he passed, charmed by his swagger. But Dalizu didn't want a girl who talked back. He wanted someone quiet, someone he could mold. So when he saw Kena sweeping the yard, eyes down, shoulders low, he smirked. "That one," he told her aunt. "She looks obedient. I'll marry her." Her aunt didn't ask Kena how she felt. No one did. They just told her, "Be grateful. He's taking you to town." Kena stayed quiet. In her heart, she hoped maybe things would be different in Zubani. Maybe he would grow to love her. Maybe her patience would open his heart. But love never came. Dalizu didn't see her as a wife. He saw her as a possession. The moment they reached Zubani, he made the rules clear. "You don't go out unless I say. You don't speak unless I ask. You don't touch my things." Kena nodded. She cooked early in the morning, cleaned the entire house, and waited for him to return from the garage. Sometimes he came back drunk, sometimes with friends, sometimes with women who looked at her like a maid. He never introduced her as his wife, just the girl at home. Dalizu's arrogance only grew. He'd sit in the living room with his friends, feet on the table, music loud, shouting football predictions like he owned the world. He'd boast about how he picked a girl no one wanted and made her something, but he gave her nothing. When he was angry, he took it out on her, shouting, breaking plates, blaming her for things she didn't do. And every time, Kena stayed quiet, not because she was weak, but because she was watching, waiting. One evening, Dalizu returned home, furious that his favorite shirt wasn't ironed. Kena had spent the whole day hand-washing his clothes, but forgot that one. Instead of asking, he shouted, slammed the wall, and left the house. The neighbors heard but said nothing. In Zubani, people didn't interfere. Later that night, he came back with a new woman, bright lipstick, loud voice, expensive perfume. He told Kena to sleep in the kitchen. She didn't cry. She just picked up her mat and left. To Dalizu, Kena was invisible. To him, kindness was weakness. He believed a man's power was in how small he could make his woman feel. And Kena, she was the smallest thing in his world. But what he didn't see, what he never saw, was that quiet doesn't mean defeated. Kena was watching. Kena was learning. And soon, the same man who dragged her by the hair would be forced to look up at the woman he tried to bury. 2 weeks after the rushed wedding, everything in Kena's life had already turned sour. The small hope she had carried into Dalizu's home had faded. She had become a shadow in the house, cooking, cleaning, and barely breathing. Then came the day that would mark her forever. That afternoon, Dalizu invited his friends over, Mwalo, Zajo, and Brikoto. They came loud, laughing, and full of pride. They sat on warm plastic chairs in the living room, pouring cheap liquor into plastic cups, music thumping from a speaker too loud for the neighbors. Kena, as always, stayed in the background, unnoticed. She was in the kitchen, trying to cook the meat they had brought, but the gas had finished. She didn't have money to refill it. She tried to fry the food over firewood, but the delay was too long. When she finally brought the food to them, it was cold. Dalizu stood up. He didn't ask. He didn't speak. He didn't even look her in the eye. He grabbed her by the hair. In front of his friends, he yanked her head back and dragged her out of the living room. Her body scraped against the cement floor. The men burst into laughter. They cheered like it was a show. Mwalo raised his drink and shouted, "Tame that wild cat!" Brikoto laughed so hard he spilled his drink. Zajo clapped and said, "Teach her respect, brother." Kena said nothing. Her scalp burned with every pull. Her knees were bruised, but she didn't scream. She didn't beg. Her eyes filled with tears, but none of them dropped. She stared at the dusty ground. Her fists clenched, not in fear, but in pain too deep for words. Dalizu threw her in front of the boys' quarters and barked, "Stay there until you learn your place." She picked herself up slowly, her dress torn, her hair a mess, her body shaking. But still, she didn't cry out. She simply entered the small room at the back of the compound and closed the door behind her. That night, she slept on a cold mat. She didn't eat. Her scalp throbbed, her knees ached, but her mind was wide awake. The laughter of those men still echoed in her ears, but louder than that was a new voice inside her, one that whispered, "This is not the end." In that silence, something shifted in Kena. The girl who had once accepted every insult, every command, every slap without a word, was gone. That night, a woman was born, a woman who would never let herself be dragged again. And none of them, Dalizu, Mwalo, Zajo, or Brikoto, had any idea that the same girl they mocked on that cement floor would soon walk on tiles they could only dream of. But Kena knew. She didn't need to shout it. She would show them. Dalizu didn't just hurt Kena with his hands. He crushed her with his decisions. The day after dragging her, he pointed to the outhouse near the back fence, a small, broken-down structure with cracked walls and a rusty door. "That's your place now," he said coldly. "You don't belong in my main house." Kena didn't argue. She picked up the little belongings she had, just a wrapper, a few worn clothes, and her old kerosene stove, and moved into the boys' quarters. The room was dark, with no electricity and no windows that could close properly. Wind blew in at night, and rats ran along the corners. There was no mattress, just the wrapper spread on the floor, and one metal bucket she used to bathe with cold water. Each night, she sat on the floor, back against the wall, listening to Dalizu laugh with other women inside the main house. Their voices were loud, full of mockery and joy. Sometimes they played music, sometimes she heard their footsteps dancing, and sometimes they called her a village goat through the open windows. Kena would stare at the cracked ceiling and whisper in her heart, "One day." But even in that pain, Kena never stopped working. Before the first cock crowed, she was up. She cleaned the main house floors, washed Dalizu's clothes, fetched water, and made breakfast, even when he didn't eat it. She did it all silently, like a ghost moving through her own life. People in the compound saw her but pretended they didn't. Some neighbors pitied her, others laughed. A few said, "She's too soft, she deserves it." But Kena ignored them all. She wasn't trying to prove anything. She was simply surviving. The boys' quarters became more than a place of exile. It became her secret corner of strength. At night, When Delizu slept, she would light her kerosene stove, boil water, and read an old book her mother once gave her. The pages were torn, but the words gave her comfort. She began writing her thoughts in a small notebook, her dreams, her pain, her hopes. She didn't cry. She didn't complain. She was storing it all like firewood for a storm. Delizu thought he had broken her. To him, Kena was nothing more than a maid who stayed quiet and accepted shame. But what he didn't know was that every insult, every lonely night in that dark room, was shaping her into something harder than stone. And while he laughed, while the other women danced in her place, while he slept in the main house like a king, Kena was in the shadows, growing, planning, rising, not loudly, but surely. Kena had reached her limit. She knew if she stayed quiet and waited, nothing would change. So one morning, with trembling hands and an empty stomach, she went to Mama Jato, the kind market woman who once gave her leftover tomatoes. Kena bowed her head and whispered, "Please, I need help. Just 500 naira. I'll pay it back." Mama Jato looked at her tired face, the bruises hidden behind silence, and without asking questions, handed her the money. With it, Kena bought a few tubers of yam, some pepper, palm oil, and onions. She cleaned her old kerosene stove, borrowed a rusty frying pan from a neighbor, and set up under the big mango tree near the bus stop. Her first sale was one small plate to a conductor rushing to catch passengers. He smiled and said, "Not bad." It was enough. Every day, Kena woke up before dawn, cleaned Delizu's house like always, then hurried to her spot with her basket of ingredients. She cut yam into thin strips, fried them golden brown, and served them with spicy pepper sauce in old newspaper. The smell attracted schoolchildren, bus drivers, and tired traders. She didn't talk much, just served and smiled. At first, people laughed. Some women whispered, "Wasn't she married to that mechanic?" Others scoffed, "Look how she's fallen." Even Dalizu passed by one day with a girl on his arm and shouted across the road, "My wife is a roadside cook now." His friends laughed hard. But Kena didn't flinch. She kept frying. She counted every coin. No money was wasted. She hid her savings in a tin box under her mat in the boys' quarters. Some days, she sold nothing. Some days, she sold everything. But each day, she learned something new. How to make her sauce tastier. How to speak politely to rude customers. How to buy cheaper ingredients in the next village. She reinvested every little profit, bought a bigger frying pan, then a small wooden table, then plastic plates. Bit by bit, people started coming back, not just for the food, but for her calm face and her quiet strength. "You have something different," one woman said. "You're not just cooking yam, you're giving comfort." And slowly, Kena's hands, once used only for scrubbing floors and dodging slaps, started building something of her own, something small but growing. She didn't beg Delizu for anything. She didn't remind him she was his wife. She let him laugh. She let the world mock. Because deep in her heart, she knew one thing. This is just the beginning. And in that small, smoky corner by the bus stop, where grease stained her wrapper and sweat ran down her face, Kena was planting the seeds of something powerful. And no one, not even Delizu, could see what was coming. That afternoon was hot. The sun beat down like fire, and Kena's wrapper was soaked in sweat. Her fingers, burned from frying, barely rested between customers. Then, without warning, a black Jeep rolled to a stop right in front of her table. It was spotless, expensive, and out of place in a dusty roadside spot like hers. A tall woman stepped out, dressed in white linen, heels clicking softly on the ground. She wore dark glasses, her face unreadable. Everyone paused to stare. Who was she? Why had she stopped here? The woman didn't say a word at first. She simply pointed at a plate of fried yam and nodded. Kena served her, hands slightly trembling. The woman sat on a broken bench beside a vulcanizer's shop and began to eat, slowly, bite after bite. When she was done, she stood, wiped her hands neatly with a napkin she carried, and walked up to Kena. "You season this with pain," she said, her voice smooth and low, but also with power. Kena blinked, unsure how to respond. No one had ever said something like that before. "I'm Madame Yara," the woman continued. "I invest in women who fight quietly." She opened her bag, pulled out a small, clean container and handed it to Kena. Inside was a business card and a key. "That's a container space in the central market," she said. "It's yours now. Rent paid for 6 months. You'll also get a small loan. No interest. Just prove me wrong." Before Kena could even ask anything, the woman turned and entered her Jeep. Kena stared at the container in her hands, heart thumping. She looked around. No one laughed this time. Even the taxi drivers were quiet. Mama Jato clapped slowly, smiling wide. That night, Kena didn't sleep. The next day, she woke before sunrise, washed her best wrapper, packed her pan, ingredients, and tin box of savings, and walked to the market square. There it was, her name painted freshly on the container, Kena's Fire Yam and Sauce. It wasn't fancy, just a small metal shop with a wooden door and one bench, but to Kena, it was a palace. She opened it, arranged her ingredients, lit her stove, and began to fry. The smell drifted through the market. People stopped. Some remembered her from the bus stop. Others just followed the scent. By afternoon, she had sold out. Madame Yara never called, never came again. But Kena didn't disappoint. She worked like her life depended on it, because it did. She didn't just serve food. She served dignity. She served the taste of a woman who had been dragged by her hair, locked in a boy's quarters, and laughed at, yet refused to break. And with every plate she sold, the world began to see not just a snack seller, but a storm rising. Kena's fire never went out. It only burned brighter. Within 2 years, the little container shop became something much bigger. Kena's firepot opened 4 branches across the town, each one painted in warm colors, always smelling of roasted yam, smoked fish, and her signature pepper sauce. People stood in lines just to get a taste. Some came by car, some on foot, and some traveled from other villages just to say they ate from Kena's pot. But Kena wasn't just selling food. She was feeding lives. She hired only women, single mothers abandoned by their partners, widows forgotten by society, and young girls who reminded her of herself at 19, silent, unsure, and unseen. She gave them uniforms, paid them well, and trained them with patience. Every woman who walked through her kitchen left with more than money. They left with dignity. Kena herself became a name in Zubani. People whispered her story in salons, markets, and church gatherings. But she didn't walk with pride. She wore soft fabrics, wrapped her hair in simple scarves, and smiled often. She didn't speak much about the past, never mentioned Delizu, never told the press or customers about what happened in that compound. But deep down, she never forgot it. Sometimes, while stirring a pot or counting money, flashes would return. Her being dragged across the sand, the cheers of Mwalo and Brikoto, the cold nights on the cement floor in the outhouse. But instead of making her bitter, it made her sharper. She moved with purpose. Every store she opened was a quiet message to every girl suffering in silence. You are not finished. One day, a journalist visited her 3rd branch. He asked, Madam Kena, what's the secret to your success? She looked at her workers, laughing in the kitchen, flour on their cheeks, fire in their eyes, and answered, pain, patience, and pepper sauce. The video went viral. Still, she never changed. She prayed every morning before opening her shops. She made sure the widows got paid first. And every Sunday, she packed leftover meals and delivered them to the women's shelter near the old Mbenzi Bridge. People started calling her the Firepot Queen. But to those who knew her, she was just Kena, the girl who used to fry yam by the bus stop. Yet even in all her glory, she avoided one street, Delizu's. That compound still stood. Same paint, same gate. She hadn't seen it in years. She didn't need to. Because one day, without saying a word, she would return, not for revenge, but to reclaim what was stolen. Not just dignity, but space, silence, self-worth. The same place she was dragged by her hair. She would one day walk in, keys in hand, and own it. But for now, she stirred her pot, nodded to her staff, and smiled. Her fire was still rising. Delizu sat outside with his head in his hands. The sun was hot, but the shame burned hotter. He had lost his job at the auto shop 2 months ago after an argument with the manager. His pride had kept him from begging. He thought something else would come quickly, but nothing did. Days turned into weeks. His phone stopped ringing. The women who used to visit him, bringing perfumes and laughter, vanished as soon as the money dried up. Even Mwalo and Brikoto, his loud friends, stopped answering his calls. The compound felt empty now, quiet, too quiet. Then came the landlord's letter, an eviction notice. 3 weeks to pack and leave. He argued, shouted, threatened. But the landlord didn't care. Bills were unpaid. The house was going up for sale. Delizu paced the compound, bitter and confused. How did everything go wrong so fast? Then, one afternoon, a sleek black SUV pulled up to the gate. It was clean, expensive. He squinted from the balcony, trying to see who it was. 3 men in black suits stepped out. One held a folder, another carried keys. The third looked around, serious and calm. "Excuse me," one of them said, facing the confused landlord and a few neighbors who had gathered. "We are from Kena Foods Limited. As of today, this property belongs to our client." Dalizu froze. "What? What did you say?" he asked, voice shaking. The man opened the folder and showed him stamped documents, official seals, signatures, ownership transfer. "Kena Foods has purchased this house," the man repeated, polite but firm. "You are required to vacate in 7 days." Dalizu couldn't speak. His lips moved, but nothing came out. The neighbors gasped. Some covered their mouths. Others looked at Dalizu with wide eyes. It couldn't be real, but it was. He stumbled back into the house, sat on the same chair where he used to drink and laugh with friends while Kena cleaned the floor at his feet. His eyes scanned the compound, the same compound where he had dragged her by the hair. Now, she owned it, not rented, owned. Not in her name alone, but in the name of a company built from fried yam, peppered sauce, and pain. The same pain he thought would crush her. Now it brought his downfall. He looked around the house that once made him feel like a king, and all he saw were echoes of his pride and her silence. And the silence was louder than ever. He sat in that silence, alone. Dalizu sat on a wooden bench outside the same compound where he once ruled with noise and pride. His clothes were stained, his slippers worn out. His face, once full of arrogance, now looked sunken and tired. The laughter that used to echo from the house was gone. All that remained was silence and the weight of his choices. Then came the sound of heels clicking on the pavement. He looked up. Kena walked in, tall, graceful, glowing. She wore a fitted Ankara dress with matching heels and bold red lipstick that made her dark skin shine even brighter. Her head was held high, her steps calm, powerful. Behind her, 2 assistants followed closely, carrying documents and keys. Dalizu stood up quickly, his mouth dry. He hadn't seen her in years, not since she walked away from the boys' quarters with nothing but dignity and a kerosene stove. "Kena, he stammered, voice cracking, but she raised her hand, just one gentle gesture that silenced him. There was nothing he could say, no apology strong enough, no excuse worth hearing. She walked up to him and handed him a plate, hot fried yam, perfectly golden, with that pepper sauce he once mocked. The same one that built her empire, the same one that now had her name on buildings across the state. He stared at the food, then at her. His hands shook as he took the plate. Tears filled his eyes. The scent brought back memories of nights he laughed while she cried, of mornings he insulted her as she swept the compound. He took a bite, then another, slowly. His tears fell freely now, not just from shame, but from the taste. The same fire he once ignored now warmed his chest. When he finished, a young girl, about 16, walked up to him with a small receipt. He looked at her, confused. "What's this?" he asked. The girl smiled politely. "Your bill, sir." He blinked, stunned. "Bill." Kena turned around, her voice clear and calm. "No free meals in this house," she said. "Not anymore." Dalizu's mouth hung open. He couldn't respond. Kena didn't wait for a reply. She walked past him into the compound. The gates closed behind her. This time, she held the keys. This time, she didn't need to beg to enter. She didn't need permission to belong. Now, she was the one in charge. And Dalizu, he was just another visitor. A stranger, in the very place where he once mocked her. Sometimes, the one you treat as nothing becomes the one you can't face without shame. Sometimes, the one you drag will rise so high, you'll need permission just to greet them. Never underestimate a silent woman. Her silence might just be the sound of strategy. If this story touched your heart, then pause for a moment and think, how many Kenas are out there, silently enduring pain, abuse, and humiliation, yet rising like fire when no one expects it? How many women are dragged, mocked, broken, only to rebuild themselves with nothing but strength, faith, and quiet power? Kena's story is not just a tale, it's a mirror for every man who thought a woman's silence meant weakness, and a mirror for every woman who forgot her worth because someone else told her she had none. To every woman watching this, your pain is not the end of your story. Sometimes, the fire they used to hurt you is the same fire you'll use to cook your victory. And to every man who thinks love means control, remember Dalizu, because the woman you disrespect today might be the same woman who'll sign your eviction letter tomorrow. Let Kena's journey remind us all that silence isn't surrender, it's strategy. So if this story moved you, if you felt a lump in your throat or a tear in your eye, please like this video, share it with someone who needs this reminder, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more heart-touching stories like this one. Your support keeps these stories alive. Thank you for watching, thank you for feeling, and thank you for believing in voices that rise from silence. Until the next story, stay strong, stay kind.